How do two men connected by one of the darkest chapters in American history end up calling each other brothers? In the aftermath of 9/11, America was angry, afraid, and desperate to prevent another attack. But crippling fear can often blur the lines between what feels necessary and what is ethical. And what happens when protecting our values begins to conflict with protecting our safety? In this episode of Truth Be Told, we explore that question through the documentary Leaving Hotel California. I'm joined by filmmakers Chimène and Aybüke, as well as Mark Fallon, former special agent in charge and deputy commander of the United States Department of Defense's Criminal Investigation Task Force back at Guantanamo Bay, and Mohamedou Slahi, who endured years of detention and torture at Guantanamo Bay. This story takes us from the interrogation rooms of Guantanamo to the moment that Mark and Mohamedou finally meet, highlighted in the film, and the meaning of the powerful words, bound to remain human. And Mohamedou challenges us with perhaps the most important question on the episode. Maybe asking, does torture work, is the wrong question. This episode is by far one of my favorite discussions that we've had on this show, and I'm honored to be joined by these guests and admire their courage and vulnerability in sharing these stories. This is Truth Be Told. This is the Truth Be Told podcast, where we unlock the secrets of strategic communication. Welcome to this episode of the Truth Be Told podcast. I am your host, Dave Thompson. I am joined by a whole group of incredible people today. So we're going to talk about a documentary and a film that's in process of getting hopefully distributed soon so everybody can see and watch, but really incredible story that's highlighting a good friend of mine, Mark Fallon, who we'll talk to here in a little bit. And also another colleague of Mark's, Mohamedou, and the interaction the two of them had highlighted in the film. But first, I want to talk to our two filmmakers, directors and producers, about kind of why this came to be. The film is titled Leaving Hotel California, which makes it seem like it's about a vacation resort of some sort, but it's not.
Yeah, it's
So
not.
talk to me about that.
Yeah, one of the things, Dave, we found, as you know, is we had so many people that we were trying to get released from Guantanamo who should have never been there in the first place. And, you know, the task force that I ran, I had more people conducting the investigation to exonerate people rather than to bring to trial because people shouldn't have brought there. And so we called it Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. So, you know, it was just so difficult. We had, you know, almost 800 people there at different times. So that's really when I mentioned that in passing, and I think Shivana said, whoop, made a note about it and said, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, so in the first meeting we ever had with Mark, it wasn't even like the story wasn't about Mark yet, but it was just a research interview we had with him. He told us the name for Guantanamo Bay, we call it Hotel California. So I wrote it down, and after we ended the Zoom, I looked at Aybüke and I just put the name Leaving before, because everybody who is in this film left Guantanamo Bay, left Hotel California, but mentally they can never check out. Everybody leaves with scars. So that's why we felt from the beginning, even before the film was like a concept, we had this name, and it was, yeah.
Yeah, I know you guys explain a little bit of that at the kickoff of the film, and we'll, Mark, in a little while I'm going to pass it off to you because I want to kind of set the stage for what the climate and the political temperature was like at that time. But for the two of you putting this together, I know this started as a student project. What was the first, like, where did this interest come from to highlight kind of anti-torture movement and our history here at Guantanamo?
Yeah. So Aybüke and we met in second year of journalism school, and we really wanted to follow a course of documentary making, and we did both have a enormous interest in human rights and bring stories to light that are often unheard. And Aybüke, she once went to a book reading from Mohamedou, and that's how she met Mohamedou for the first time. And she told me, and after that the ball just went rolling and we just dived in.
Aybüke, what was that experience like?
Oh, I can't describe it. Just meeting Mohamedou for the first time, we first saw the Mauritanian Netflix film, and that story kept my mind thinking about his life in the Netherlands. And I just knew that someone who was kept 14 years in Guantanamo Bay is just walking somewhere in the Netherlands. So that always just inspired me, because he is always this forgiving person. And he, at that lecture, he really touched my heart, because he said, I want that you forgive somebody today. And that was just, I don't know, I can't describe it.
I think it's incredible. I'm glad you did. I'm curious. So I know, Mark, we've talked about this, and you always, very courageous in what your role was then and still today. And you talk about, how is history going to look back on this time frame of torture, and specifically at sites like Guantanamo. And so I think it's interesting that the two of you have this exposure, first of all, internationally, right? So you're not in the US, and you weren't living here or maybe around when all of this was actually happening. And so now you have this unique perspective of learning about something that's history, that a lot of people in the US might have a different perspective or lived through it. So when you both kind of first learned from Mohamedou, or maybe you've learned before that, but any first impressions or reactions to what was going on? Were you shocked about it? Was it something you had heard about, or what was your first kind of aha moment of what happened there?
Yeah, so I was 4 months when 9/11 happened. Aybüke wasn't even in the making.
Right.
She's now 22 years old. I'm 25 years old. So we're very young. But even though we're not here to live through it all, I think even in Europe you get so much information from what was happening there. But in a way also you didn't, because a lot of things were just kept quiet. So for me, when I just start reading about Mohamedou, and my first encounter with him, it was like, wow, how can somebody so forgiving, so kind, so funny, been seen so many years as like a terrorist? And even now, a lot of people who I talk with about this case, they're still like, oh, it's way too dangerous. Also, school thought this was very dangerous and we shouldn't make this film. So there's still a lot of things, and people are like, don't do it. So that's also something for us to do it.
I love that. It seems like you have the same sentiment as Mark. When somebody says don't, or it's just too scary, just go do it anyway. I think, Mark, what was that? What's that like for you when you're interacting with both of them? This is kind of what you, I guess, either feared or thought about, right? Is what is this going to reflect like down the road?
Yeah. Well, first, Dave, this is, I think, our third podcast together, and I just want to. Is this like Saturday Night Live? When I do 5, I get a jacket.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I'll get you a watch, maybe. not a Casio though, because if I recall, that was a
Don't
problem.
do that. I don't want to be labeled.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it is really kind of amazing. The way I got involved in it was really Mohamedou, and this wasn't started about me. Their attention turned to me. But Mohamedou contacted me and said, hey, there's these filmmakers over here. Would you mind talking to them? And one of the things that I've done, and I've done a couple other documentaries, and is to make sure that I want to make sure that they know the real story. Right. And so because there's so much bad information out there. There's so much intentional bad information out there to shape the public's perception about what happened there, that I just wanted to make sure that they had ground truth, so that the story they told would be an accurate reflection from a historic perspective. Because and I know what you're referring to, back in 2002, when I finally realized that this torture program that was going on in the CIA in these secret black sites far away and no one really knew the details of, was gravitating to the Department of Defense. And it was shocking to me because, I mean, I know that I've worked counterintelligence and NCIS as a career NCIS agent. Your overseas counterintelligence operations are coordinated with the CIA and domestically with the FBI. You know, so I had worked with the agency for years. But when I saw that the military was actually going to embrace, you know, prisoner abuse, you know, a family of interrogational abuses up to torture, as a matter of policy, I mean, it was shocking to me. I just thought that when I first started standing up, I just thought these were well-intended fools, frankly.
Yeah.
That you know, they were. We were all enraged after 9/11. I was enraged. I mean, the country was in shock. You know, 2,997 people died, or whatever the number is. It varies. And you know, we lost 17 sailors on the USS Cole the October before that. And so there was that sense of fury. But as an investigator, you're used to that, right? Certainly not at that level, but you know, if you're working a child abuse case or sexual abuse on a child or a rape case or a, you know, homicide, I mean, there's that feeling that you really want to enact some justice. But you realize that as an investigator, that's really not your job. Your job is to get information so that someone else can do that, right? The justice should be in accord under the rule of law. And so when I saw the day that I met General Miller and was down to Gitmo to actually implement this torture program, was a day that I finally recognized that I am no longer able to stop this. Right, I've done everything I can, and this is going to happen. And so I wrote an email to document. I wanted to make sure, as an investigator, right, you have to have notes. And so we knew these would be war crimes. I mean, I had lawyers. You know, the task force was 230 people, with lawyers and behavioral scientists, intelligence specialists, investigators, and so, you know, what I said in that email was, you know, somebody needs to be considering how history will look back at this. And that, you know, really about shocking the contemporary conscience. That, you know, the talk of the waterboard, and they call it the wet towel, that it would have a lymphatic gland react as if you were suffocating, but you probably won't die, but have a doctor there just in case. And I said, this is shock the conscience of anyone looking at the interrogations or the interrogators, the people doing this. And so, and I had sent that to a number of people, preserve the evidence.
Right. Sure.
So that's really, so what I love about these filmmakers is their passion to tell the story right. I mean, they talked, I gave them some names. They talked to Alberto Mora, the former general counsel of the Navy that I went to, and they talked to John Kiriakou from the CIA, about their role, and Morris Davis, chief prosecutor of the Military Commission. So they really, really delved into it and really impressed me, frankly, with their passion to really get it right and really do the right thing to educate people about what really happened.
That's great. And I know we're going to have Mohamedou on here in a few minutes, and I want to talk between you know, Mark, you and him, about some of the things you just shared. Because even me, I feel like I'm pretty well informed as to what happened, but even watching the film that you two put together, just super powerful, the humanity of all of this, right? A lot of times you read a report, you read one of Mark's books, you know, you read about it, but you don't actually feel what people felt, and you feel it in the film you put together, which is really powerful. I'm curious from you two, as Mark's talking about his investigative experience, I know, being a director, producer, filmmaker, you're also an investigator. And as you're talking to a lot of people, is there anything you either of you found in kind of your investigation or research that was surprising to you, that you did not realize was real or didn't seem real?
So many things. Yeah.
I don't know where to start. It's just, you know, I saw the film, The Mauritanian, and after you saw the film, you hear from the people who were involved that is just a little bit Hollywood. And so, yeah, that was, I guess, the most shocking thing for me, because I really thought that the lawyers there had this major how do you call it?
A
This
role in that.
the role to get those people out, but voices like Mark's aren't just there, but they should have
Yeah,
been, I think. So
if
that
I,
was, I guess, my
yeah, if I can hop on to that. For me also, after seeing the Mauritanian, it was so different than the truth, to be honest. But for me, the most important thing was like Mark, to be honest, because I didn't know people like Mark, and Mark especially was doing what he did, and it was just not shared with the world. Yes, like, right. So for me, in all the investigation, Mark Fallon was on here, like, yeah, to meet him, to know his story, to tell his story. Yeah, was the most surprising thing that came in the whole research, but for me also one of the most important things.
Yeah.
yeah.
Dave, can I jump in here and
Yeah,
just get
absolutely.
a little inside baseball kind of on that? The initial script that was written that became the Mauritanian actually had the role of the investigators in it. You know, they contacted me and said, "This is the actor that's going to play you in
Clooney?
this."
Was it George?
No,
Yeah.
not quite.
Okay.
I think I'm more of a James Gandolfini type
Okay.
from Jersey.
Yeah.
But when it got to Cumberbatch Films, they eliminated the role of the investigators to highlight. And Stu Couch is a dear friend of mine, and we worked a case when a jet crashed into a gondola cable, and did a great job in that. When the investigators came to him and told him what was going on and things like that, but for the Hollywood version, they wanted to really exemplify the role of the lawyers and actually eliminated the role of the investigators. And actually, they have one person supposed to be a conglomeration of things. It looked more like he was with the CIA, than anything else. And so it really reshaped the story because they wanted, for the movies rather than a factual account. And that's why it was so precise getting these guys in touch with people to really talk about what really happened, because this is ground truth that
Sure.
and they put so much work into it, just getting the story right.
So I'm curious with that. That's good perspective. So I know, when Mark has talked about things, or written about things more specifically, he's got to be, well, he doesn't need to be careful, but the government may ensure that he's redacting certain information. And so I bring that up because as the two of you interacted with some of these folks, which some high ranking people, some people with a lot of credibility, a lot of experience, dare I say ego, maybe, Mark, with some people that they probably interacted with. But I'm curious from, we always focus on interviewing, investigative interviewing, but journalists are doing the same thing. Is there anything you kind of learned in that process that helped people maybe feel more comfortable to share information, or is there resistance that you felt, and how you kind of learned to handle that in any of those conversations?
For me, the most important thing was just letting those people tell their story, and in the end, putting everything next to each other and see how this become one story. That's the most important thing as a journalist, also because everybody has their own perspective. Everybody lived through it in their own way, and also accepting that some things can be said in a way that a other person won't say it in that way. So for us, I think it's very valuable that we have some training. We're trained journalists. We are still going to school for it, to the university. So I think having that background is very valuable. I'm Mohamedou.
Peace,
man.
brother.
Hey, Dave.
How are you? Is that some of this famous tea I saw you and Mark having on the in the film?
Dave, you are very young for your name. Dave people are usually like as old as I and Mark.
Okay. Well, I guess eventually I'll fill that requirement
That would be one of your goals.
at some point. Yes, I'll get there. I appreciate you joining us, Mohamedou. We were just talking about the wonderful job that these two ladies did telling the story and creating a platform for people like yourself and Mark and others they interviewed to just share a true narrative without worrying about being overly guiding or protective of what the truth is, and allowing it to flow naturally. So we were just kind of chatting a little bit about that. I just got to ask you a question. I know thank you for joining us. You're fresh off the train and probably rushed to get home and get on with us. But there's so many moments that I saw of when you and Mark interacting that were just so, it was emotional for me. It was special. And one of the things I thought was really neat is when you guys met at the airport. I know you've both been talking for a while via Zoom or email or text or WhatsApp. But that first moment, you had a sign that you were holding. Do you remember what that sign said?
Yes, the sign says honor bound to remain human. And so this is like a mock-up of the sign in Guantanamo Bay, honor bound to defend freedom. And this sign stuck with me every time, because when they used to schlep me from one block to the next, I used to be in Delta 2. This is, you understand, Mark. And then I was moved to Delta 3. And then sometimes they take me to Gold Building. Sometimes they take me to Brown Building. Sometimes they take me to Yellow Building. And all of those places have very specific jobs to them. They are for interrogation mostly. Also, they take me sometime to what they call the trailer, quote unquote, the trailer. That is CIA. And because it has no name, it has no building name, just they call it the trailer. And then every time I go there and I see this honor bound to defend freedom. I didn't speak English very well, so I asked them what it means. They told me what it meant. And I was reminded of the Arabic saying, the culprit is crying, is dying to say, please capture me. And when I was freed and I got my passport, the first international travel I did was to Robben Island. And I remember the sign also caught my attention. The sign, you know what the sign says in Robben Island? It says, we serve with pride. And in Afrikaans, ons dien met trots. And back then, I did not speak Dutch, but it stuck in English. We serve with pride. Why should you say you serve with pride? Who is questioning, your morals? And just reminded me, and I'm sure they did not sit together and said, let's see what the oppressive prisons in the world put as a sign. So that's why so my brother and my hero, I have to tell you, he spoke when no one dared to speak out.
Yeah, and continues to. And both of you, I mean, such a powerful relationship the two of you have. And I'm so glad that the two of you, the filmmakers, highlighted that. That seemed like the central point of the film, which I think was really symbolic, right? Because this wasn't necessarily a documentary on the history of Guantanamo. To me, I saw more of the people, the humanity involved, which is really, Mohamedou, what I read from your sign and what I got from that is, the people behind these stories and the history. So was there something, I'm going to go back to that in just a second, but was there something that triggered you guys for that to be kind of the highlight of the film was really the interaction between Mark and Mohamedou versus just a historical kind of documentary?
Yeah, for sure. As journalists, we're very focused on facts normally, but also as filmmakers, we really wanted to show the humanity and actually, when we met Mohamedou, when we met Mark, we were like, those people are so much more like facts, so much more like the things that you can read on paper. We have to show people the humanity and also the whole worst of the worst. Mohamedou was signed as one of the worst people alive. We wanted to show the world that Mohamedou is funny, is yeah, is all of those things above. Yeah, for sure. That was a very, very important thing for us to show. And also the friendship. Like people were like, huh? How are those people friends?
Right.
Yeah, so very important to us.
I think that's great. Let's put that into context, Mark. Like if we go back, I really liked, when you kicked off the film, and we encourage people to watch the trailer, and hopefully this becomes something everybody can see the full length soon. But you kicked it off with some news footage of George Bush talking about how we can hear you, and whoever did this will hear from all of us. And Mark, I remember that time frame it was a very felt that very patriotic. It felt very, all of America seemed to be on the same, I'll put team in air quotes, of we got to figure out what happened here. But that also translates into some problems, right? Some confirmation bias, some racial injustice, and categorizing everybody into one group. So maybe if you can just kind of set the tone for what the climate was like then, that maybe created some of these problems.
Yeah. Initially, when President Bush made the decision to use military commissions, I thought it was a poor decision, but a lawful decision, right? He's the commander in chief of the military president. He has the authority to decide that I'm going to use Article 2 courts rather than Article 3 courts, the federal courts. He's going to use a military process. Never did I envision that process was going to be designed so that you can get away with, for lack of a better term, abusing prisoners. Right? That was not in the initial thought process or psyche of me. And I frankly felt the weight of the world on my shoulders because I was the chief investigator for my job was to bring charges to justice. Right. And so it didn't pass me by the historic significance of being, the certainly the most cataclysmic attack in my lifetime, 9/11, and the Department of Defense turned to me and said, build this task force and figure this out. I mean, there was no real model like this for this court process that we didn't have. And, to start with, like, do we read them their rights or not? What are their rights? What are the offenses? Are there elements of these offenses? So just trying to design I need a building. We can find a building. We need cars. We got to get people to Gitmo. Where are they going to sleep? So all of these things going around. But the real, when I heard they were going to use Guantanamo, it was actually when John Walker Lindh was captured. And as an American citizen, it was shocking to all of us that an American citizen would be with the Taliban. What? I mean, it didn't register, didn't make sense to us. And I was the chief of counterintelligence operations for NCIS for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East then. And of course, everyone wanted to talk to them, and a guy named Hicks from Australia. And they were aboard a ship. And so NCIS had a legitimate reason to talk to them for two reasons. One, it is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, even for a citizen to fight with a foreign army. So they are subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice and federal court. And so a lot of people wanted to talk to these guys. and you don't want to go into a combat zone, right? So they were on a ship, and they said, well, what about Guantanamo? We can use Guantanamo for this. And in my mind, I'd been to Guantanamo before during the Cuban Haitian refugee crisis. So I was aware, it's a base. There's housing. There's a courtroom there. There's a brig. There's a jail. There's a hospital. So if you're going to bring, 5 or 6 people there, that would be a good place to do so. And the initial concept, they really was for the worst of the worst. I mean, that's what I was told with this task force. It's going to be like Nuremberg. We're going to take the top level people and we're going to try them. And we were told that you had to be done in a year. They said, Nuremberg's a year. This is temporary. You just got to get people in and out of there. And so it wasn't until the CIA tortured Zubaydah, with the FBI there, that the tides turned. And the warfighter in Afghanistan didn't really want to do their job screening people effectively. And there was confirmation bias. And so anyone who was brown seemed like a terrorist, right? Dick Cheney said, like, there's a 1% chance, I think he said, and George Bush said, you're either with us or against us. And so rather than effectively giving me high value targets, give me Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, those type of people, it became a dumping ground. And, as you know, in the book, I call them bounty babies. Leaflets were sent out, warlords picked up people, sold them. It was, human trafficking. And so the pressure was trying to release them because you had so many people. How do you even process that many?
Right.
But like I said, I have more people investigating to exonerate than implicate. But what you found was when you tried to show that somebody was not with Al Qaeda, and Mohamedou was with Al Qaeda at one point, fighting the Mujahideen. Right? He did go to Al Farouk training camp before 9/11, right? Not after. So we made a distinction. If someone went into the fight after September 11th happened, well, that's a higher risk. I mean, that's somebody who's going there to fight the U.S. But so many people trained at Al Farouk over the years, and we supported the Mujahideen, the fighting with the Mujahideen. That it was just the dynamic was so different than you would normally have, where it was just you can't release them. And for me trying to challenge you, what if they blow up a school bus of children? So like people would try to put the worst circumstances on it, that you're trying to get these people released. You're going against the norm and everything, and everyone in government just wanted to hold on to them and frankly forget about them.
Yeah, I think that's really good perspective, Mohamedou. At the time, right post 9/11, as we're kind of talking about the U.S. perspective. I remember I was in high school. I remember when it happened. I remember watching the news, and I'm sure a lot of people listening remember what it felt like. What was the climate like from your perspective? Like, was there a feeling of what does this mean next? What's the retaliation going to be to a community of people based off of maybe religion, color of skin, geographic location? Do you remember what that felt like in the aftermath?
Yes, absolutely. We were very scared because first I was in prison because I was arrested for the so-called Millennium Plot, and I was stripped of my passport. I was not allowed to travel anywhere, and I just said I keep my head down and just find a job. I found a job and started working, and then 9/11 happened. Then I remember my older brother, he came to me, and then he said to my mother, this is not the end of it, because they already had a taste of the willingness of the United States of America to forego any process and use military regime to punish people outside the rule of law. Because what happened, I was kidnapped from Dakar. This is in 2000. And I was interrogated in Senegal and in Mauritania and by the FBI. And they conclude there is no evidence that I was involved in, but I was, all my rights were taken away and I was confined to my home. That's it. So they knew that. So we were very scared. And it was an atmosphere of fear because what a lot of people in the West don't understand is that there is no protection against the United States of America if you are outside the United States of America. You have no protection. You know, they call it I remember they told me the gloves are off or something like that. And any government without the gloves of the law is just bad. I don't know any example in history where a government who said, trust us, we take care of you, and it was good outcome. And I remember it was in Ramadan when they came to me, like those two police agents. They were in plain clothes, and they just told me, you need to come with us. And as the FBI interrogation team later on said, they showed me the picture of my president and the picture of George W. Bush. They told me, this guy, pointing to George W. Bush, told this guy, pointing to my military dictator, to take you, and you have no choice but to tell us everything you know. and that's exactly the summary. And I wrote in my book, I remember the room. They interrogated me in mukhabarat, that is geheimdienst in English.
Secret Service.
Yeah, Secret Service, but not like in the US, because Secret Service in the US actually some function, but we mean in the general sense. This is the dungeon where the military regime torture its opponent in Mauritania. And that's what the FBI and other agencies, I don't know what they are, interrogate me, including German-speaking agencies. And then what I remember vividly, I don't know, Mark, I remember this, I wrote in my book, is the very big, beautiful picture of the president on the wall. And then it struck me that when the law is so ugly, and then the picture of the dictator is so beautiful, it's everywhere to see.
I appreciate you sharing that. I know, it's, again, we talked about this as we kind of kicked off the episode, is sometimes when you read a book or you watch a film, it doesn't, people don't recognize there's real people behind these stories. So as we're going through this, I so appreciate you guys both being vulnerable. I mean, Mark, I've known for a long time about his courage and coming forward, and Mohamedou, your ability to speak to this. So I appreciate that very much as we talk through this. One thing I thought was interesting, and as you just described some of those experiences, Mark and I do a lot of work in today's world on evolving interview standards, investigative interviewing standards, or interrogation standards. And in the film, Mark, you had a quote that was talking about SEER techniques, and how this kind of objective of let's use these SEER techniques, which I'll let you explain here in a second, as a means of enhanced interrogation or torture. And you said something to the effect of, well, my goal is not to increase resistance. It's to make somebody more hard or more difficult. It's acceptance. And so the reason I want to bring this up is, Mark, you can probably explain SEER to the listeners, but also, I remember at the time people were so focused on, as Mohamedou, as you said, gloves are off. Our goal is we got to figure out what happened. We don't want another attack. And it seemed like, who cares about the rules? Let's talk about safety. What people don't understand, I don't think, and Mark, you've done a good job of this, is this didn't produce any reliable information anyway, right? It put more people at risk, in fact. So I guess for both of you, Mark, if you want to kind of kick us off, but explaining kind of what SEER was, and then the use of these types of techniques. I'm curious, Mohamedou, was there ever an incentive to just say anything to try to remove and relieve the pressure? But Mark, I'll let you kind of kick off with SEER.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that we adopted that. When there's an organization within the Department of Defense called the JPRA, the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, And so that's the executive agency that oversees prisoner recovery, POW recovery. And part of that was this program called SEER, Survive, Evade, Resist, and Escape. And it was designed to try to it's a role play exercise, right? Where you're treated usually a day or two of, you're captured in the woods and you're taken back and you were subjected to a little bit of what might happen to you if you're captured by an adversary that doesn't adhere to the Geneva Conventions, right? That's going to brutalize you. And they get a safe word. They could say if it gets too bad, they know that's other soldiers or other military members doing it to you. So it's in this capacity. And the program was designed after there was a study of why American service members gave false information to the North Koreans, right? And a guy, a sociologist, an Air Force sociologist in 1957 did a study of this and came up with what they call the Bitterman's theory of coercion. And there's 8 steps in this to show that isolation, sensory deprivation, all of these things, if you do this, people would falsely confess. And the chart that they actually I've seen the PowerPoint slides that they used actually said 4 false confessions. So the thought that you would apply something that you knew produced false confessions is just so bizarre. And when the chief of staff from the JPRA came to me and said, explain SEER to me. Now I'm going to skip a sensitive compartment and information facility, with all types of handprints to get in and all sorts of bells and whistles. And when he told me this, we want to know if you guys would like to get SEER training. I was like, yeah, I know what it is. I don't envision us getting captured, and then he said, no, for interrogation. I said, what? I mean, you just explained to me it's to harden resistance. Why would we want to harden the resistance of someone? And David, it struck me yesterday. I mentioned Denise Huskins, from American Nightmare, what she said her kidnapper and rapist had done to her. And she actually brought up Bitterman's chart of coercion. She said that's what they put goggles on her. They drugged her. They did all these things to and it's called demonstrated omnipotence, right? And so that's what they tried to do to Mohamedou and the black sites is the theory is to reduce them to an infantile state so that they're totally compliant. It's really a behavioral modification program. What they did, and they were trying to condition, and Mohamedou can talk about it, him to tell them what they wanted to know. And Mohamedou told them exactly what they wanted to know.
Mohamedou, as much or as little as you feel comfortable sharing with that, I'm just curious what that perspective is, because it seems obvious to me that we're forcing compliance versus cooperation there. So it's, I'll just say something or say anything to appease the people doing this to me. But I don't know if you can bring us to that perspective, if there was ever an incentive to just say anything.
So let me first address one point. That is the courage of Chimène and Aybüke for digging up this very uncomfortable subject that no one wants to talk about, including in the Netherlands. Because I know this may be a little bit dangerous in that it's going to boost the ego of American people like yourself, Dave and Mark. But unfortunately, historically, Dutch people don't want to see anything negative in general of the United States of America. Because the arguments always, they saved us from the Nazis. And this is true. And they cannot get past that. And it's very emotional to them. And so my wish and my prayer is that Aybüke and Chimène get the chance to meet a larger audience in the United States of America, because ironically, Americans are much more receptive to this, kind of daring films than in Europe, because we are conditioned here in Europe to watch Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise is perfect. I mean, how many times have you met a guy over 60 who looks like he's 25?
Oh, stop.
No, I admire you guys. I admire you guys. Hands down. I'm not saying anything. And this is
Thank
the
you so
good.
much, Mohamedou.
This is the good thing about America. That this is what people want to watch about. They don't want to watch this mess. And the other point before I address this enhanced interrogation technique is the callous and argument that in America, the discussion I hear is not about the morality of torture itself, but is torture going to serve us? And people with the best of intention, they just want to convince American and to prove to them scientifically that torture does not work. And rightly so, but this is so insulting to me. But what if torture works? So would you still torture? And I give an example. In Africa, we are very poor and we have a lot of kids. And I bet if you kill like 7 of those 10 son of bitches, you will do much better economically. But would you go and kill your 7 children to get better economically? And my wish is for us to concentrate more on the morality of torture itself. And this distinction also I'm sorry, I have to be very direct here. I think the distinction between American citizen and everybody else sounds very fascist, because we are human being. Whether you're American, whether you're Turkish, whether you're from Zimbabwe, you are a human being and you deserve to be treated with utmost respect and humanity. When my brother Mark was there, I was chosen for what they call enhanced interrogation technique. And this is like a euphemism, just, because it was torture. And so the first 70 days, 70, not 17, 70 days, I was not allowed to sleep. And I was numb. I had no feeling. And the thing I always waited on is for them to touch me. So I was sexually assaulted 3 times. And one of the things that stayed with me and were so painful, in the second session of assault, it was 2 young women, and 1 guy. And one of the women, she was hired just for sexual assault. She looked at me and she said, today, we show you the real, quote unquote, American sex that you never saw in Yemen. I was like, what? Yemen is closer to the United States of America than Mauritania. Of course, that's hyperbolism, but I've never been to Yemen. I'm very far away from Yemen, but the callousness of not even recognizing who you are, not even separating like people, because you are from there, you are from down there. That's all it matters. There is no difference between a Yemeni, a Senegalese, and this is. And I'm telling you, Dave, this was more painful than the assault itself, because I was not recognized as the person I am. There is no acknowledgement. I was from Yemen. And this is so painful. This reminds me of a scene in Dumb and Dumber. You don't kill someone you don't know, you know? And so these 70 days, what I remember, it was a repetition of the 7 months in Jordan. And I did not know the days. You know how I counted the days? I would scratch in myself one line. And then, you know, and I'm practicing Muslim, I need to pray, but I don't know what to pray. I don't know how many days. And after 7 months, I lost 10 days. I know this because I remember one of the interrogator, he came to me and I saw his watch. They forget, they have to take their watch away. And but he forgot. You know, well, your colleague, First Sergeant Charlie, you know, and yes, and I'm telling you that I have no bitterness against American people. I dare say that American people are one of the kindest people I ever met in my life, most generous people. You cannot judge any people by the action of their government. This would be very hypocritical, because if you judge you by the actions of a military dictatorship that handed me over to the US, then I'm an evil person.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. I mean, I really, this concept of let's change the discussion from does torture work versus is it moral in the first place? I think that's such a good shift of mindset for people. Because I think, Mark, you know, a lot of times in the States, if we downgrade this to something as simple right now in the US, we're talking about things like stop lying to people about evidence, stop pretending you have evidence when you don't have it. And a lot of times the argument that Mark and I work on here are people saying, well, does it work or not? Versus what's the ethics around it?
Is it right or not?
Right. And I think that's such a great, I'm glad you said it that way, because that's such a really good perspective, is there's two different ways to look at this. So I thought that's really interesting. Mark, I know in the film that you two highlighted, which I really enjoyed, was like Mark's perspective of what was going on at the time. And I know one of the things that you spoke about when you and Mohamedou were talking is that you had the ability to read the interrogation logs. And so you're looking at the back and forth. As you're reading those or reviewing those, what were some of your reactions to that?
Yeah, it was, it's when I really decided that I had to do something. Is Mohamedou Ould Slahi, prisoner 63, ISN 63, who, you know, likely would have been the 20th hijacker, right? Had he gotten the country when he was turned away, and it's a whole nother story. But when I was reading those logs and I saw that he got hypothermia and he was taken to the hospital, and I was reading reports that detainees were dying in Afghanistan. Right, you had Dilwar, the taxi driver. There's a great film on that by Alex Gibney, and I really thought, listen, you know, we're about to kill somebody in an interrogation at Guantanamo Bay, a Navy base, and I'm the senior NCIS person involved. You know, as deputy assistant director level, I'm on this task force overseeing this. I'm the most senior investigator involved in this process, and I have to try to stop this from happening. And Dave, what was horrible and enlightening was, the horrible part was when I would go to seniors to try to stop this, no one agreed that it was right to do it. They would understand my point, and I would tell them, listen, it's a violation of U.S. law. It's a violation of, it's just wrong. You know, it's a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The military does this, but nobody was willing to do anything. People told me, listen, you're on record as opposing it, so don't worry about it. I'm like, we're about to kill somebody. I mean, what do you mean? And I finally got to Alberta Moore. I went to the director of NCIS, and Dave Brandt, who was an old friend. We would work undercover before when we were assigned in the Philippines, and you know, we knew each other's families. grew up in NCIS together. And I said, Dave, I've done everything I can. It's out of control now. And he said, let's bring this to Alberto Mora. And when I brought it to Alberto Mora, who was appointed by President Bush, those general counsels are appointees, never realizing that this was approved at those levels. We just thought these were overzealous generals who were unwitting and just didn't know right from wrong. And so Alberto told me, Mark, this could impact the presidency. Thinking the president could fall because of this, not realizing the president condoned this stuff. And so that was the kind of great moral dilemma, for me, was how far do you go? And this involves Mohamedou after this, when Alberto Mora said, go down one more time before he falls on his sword, as we say in the part of it. Go down one more time. He couldn't believe that this was happening, and he said, "Go talk to Miller one more time, just to make sure that he understands everything you just told me again." And I had the ability to order jets, so I had a jet take me to Guantanamo, and I met with General Miller. And he said, he basically blew me off and said, if you want to be on the team, you have to wear the same jersey. And I said, I'm not on your team. And at that time, the only one that they had put a request in to use torture on was Gitani. That same day that I talked to Miller was when he decided to do that to Mohamedou. And I don't know if it was to spite me or to show that who are you to challenge me, but unfortunately we got it delayed though. Being they didn't do it right then, but that was in November of 2002, and it delayed Mohamedou's because we were raising such a fuss over Gitani because that one was approved.
Yeah. And I know you, in the film, you guys covered that really well as the two of you, Mark and Mohamedou, are sitting there and you guys have that discussion, which was really interesting to see. And I'm going to go back to the film in just a second, but about the meeting between the two of you guys. But Mark, Mohamedou, I know you had interacted for a while, and this was the first time, I think, Mark, as you said, that you met in the flesh. But I'm curious about the origin of that, because unless I got this wrong, Mohamedou, were you 14 years? Is that right? At Guantanamo? 15. Okay. 15. And so what, past that, what allowed the two of you to engage in the first place? And what was that kind of initial communication like? And then I want to bring us to what you all did for the film.
Yeah. It really, the books are what started it. So, we both had books out on the Guantanamo from different sides of the fence. And we wound up doing book talks together, and often in these book talks they were virtual, so I'd be facing the audience and Mohamedou would be on a screen behind me, and I kept telling him stop looking over my shoulder. But it just, his humanity was incredible. So we started communicating, and then would go back and forth, and we'd have video chats with each other, and we did a book TV, C-SPAN book TV talk together. We did one for Physicians for Human Rights. I think we did one. And then even when I was at the Center for Ethics in the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania, we did a virtual talk where we had Mohamedou, we had Mozambique, who was a Brit, who was at Guantanamo, and Mansour Adiafi, who was a Yemeni, who was at Guantanamo. And we did a talk with General Zanakis, was on the panel with me, just kind of about the experience. And what I love about this is how it humanizes people who were considered less than human. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, because that's really what we did is, we were all powerful. We were demonstrating omnipotence over these people that are less than us, right? Whether they're not American. And so what what I love about this, what I love about this film, what I love about Mohamedou, is that he allows people to see the person he is. He's fun loving. He's joking. He loves to have a good time. He's just a decent human being. And that's what we need to kind of understand, is that these people, right after the film premiered in the Netherlands, I then went on to Vienna, Austria, and I met with Mansour Adiafi. And when I was meeting with Mansour, we were doing a talk, and virtually Mozambique was on the talk that we did there. And so this is the message that I hope that people take out of the film, is that we're all together. We're in this together. We're in one world together. And Mohamedou is just such a great guy that was thrown into the situation that, I mean, the National Security Council, when Condoleezza Rice orders his torture, right? As this is the worst of the worst. I mean, I often say the worst of the worst may be the generals that were assigned to this thing. And when Mohamedou mentioned honor bound to defend freedom, I also see that sign and say it's horror bound to defame freedom. Because that's what was going on behind that fence line.
Right. I would say, it's interesting, and I want to ask you too, Chimène and Aybüke, about what your, I guess, emotions were like before the meeting, the physical meeting. But yeah, Mark, I think what I saw between the two of you is it seemed like you guys were brothers, honestly. Like, it seemed like you were family members who hadn't seen each other in a while, and just so powerful with that, and the way you guys captured that was really well done. But I'm sure the two of you were kind of working through this. Let me just give you a quick little example of what was going in my head. I had a podcast last season, I believe. And my guest had written a book and done some research on the Oklahoma City bombing, which was a big attack here in the States. And she actually was able to interview the father of the person, Timothy McVeigh, of the person who committed the bombing, and also the father of one of the victims of the bombing. And she was looking at both of their perspectives. And at the end of her book, she describes how she had both of these fathers meet each other. And the book was titled Grace from the Rebel. And it was really about how both fathers lost a child, one at the hands of the other, but they're still both people. They're still both parents. And so that was in my head as I was watching this, is just these two perspectives, and you guys facilitate this meeting. So I'm curious from you, I'm sure you had, you're behind cameras and thinking about what you're going to ask, and you're filming Mark at the airport and the gates. And I'm sure Mark got everything right on take one. But besides all of that, I'm wondering, did either of you have any kind of emotional anticipation or anxiety leading up to that first meeting? Like, were you just as, I don't want to say nervous, but how were you feeling leading up to that?
Yeah, it was so strange, because you're working through that moment for so long. You're living through all the emotions, but also we flew with Mark from Geneva to Amsterdam, so we were there on the plane the whole way. So it's the beginning of the week in Geneva. Mark was like, I'm so nervous, and before he was like, I'm so excited. Right. So you just follow those emotions, but it was also very nerve-wracking to us, because we needed to like give Mark a microphone, Mohamedou, and the thing. So I did most of the interviewing, but this moment we didn't want to have any interviews. Just leave it be natural and just play it out as it should be played out. But to be sure, we wanted to film with 3 cameras. So Aybüke and myself, we had a camera, and we called in Geneva with amazing guys, Joris Kleintjes, who also was at the airport. So we just wanted to make sure there was also somebody who was disinvolved, so who had less nerves. It was so emotional, and just trying not to tear up. And maybe Aybüke wants to tell something about it, but it was just amazing.
Yeah, as Chimène says, we worked to that meeting. So when it happened, my heart was beating faster and faster. And it was just, I had some tears, but you have also, you have to control your emotions because you can't let this meeting go away because I threw up. So, yeah, it was very emotional. And I was just very, very grateful to have Mohamedou there. Yeah, I was very grateful.
Yeah, it's so strange because you're working to it and it's very emotional for us as also people who are so involved with Mark and Mohamedou, but it's also as the filmmakers and the people behind the camera at the moment, you have to just shut off your emotions because otherwise you will see it in the film. You would just see a shake or something. So I think when we came back later on around, I think, what time were we back? Like that day took to 1 or something. And we were just, everything just came out and we were excited. We were emotional, everything. So it was a very emotional week also. Yeah, but amazing. So valuable, so privileged to be there and to arrange this.
We did a great job capturing it. I don't want to steal too much content from the film because we want people to see it. But there's one other quote I jotted down, and I think Mohamedou had said, "I feel safe with you." I believe was what you said to Mark. And when I heard that, I was like, "What an incredible perspective right now!" I mean, that's clearly Mark, the opposite of what was happening at Guantanamo, of like learned helplessness, and there is no safety, and there is no grounding. And so Mohamedou, I don't know what prompted that, if you remember that moment when you said that to Mark, or if you could just expand on that a little bit, but that was a really powerful scene.
Yes. First, I need to repeat that I'm so grateful to Aybüke and Chimène because they are the one who did this. It's not me. It's not Mark. So we have to admit that because they are the one who captured the moment. You know, I don't know, Dave, whether you're familiar with the saying of Leibniz. Leibniz is a German mathematician and philosopher. He said, a leaf does not fall if there is no one watching it, or something like that. So, and people are forgetting Guantanamo Bay. People are forgetting the horror, what happened in Guantanamo Bay as a lab for torture, and to define the future, how to deal with organized crime, or let's say terrorism. And we need this film more than ever. Why? Because back then the story was, don't worry about those people. Those are bad people. Look at their face. And the picture they made of me, I would have put myself in a prison if I saw that picture. Because I was like dragged. So I don't remember when this picture was, but two men holding me, my face, and I'm unshaven for many days. And I look very scared, and my face, I don't know, because of maybe because of beating, swollen. And this is the picture they disseminate in the world. So, and American people bought into this narrative. Today, American law enforcement kill people on American street for demonstrating to save immigrants. And this is unheard of. Today, America arrests people in the United States, in the mainland of the United States, and take them to Guantanamo Bay. And you know, this Greek story, about the three bulls, the one that was black and the one that was white, and they all accepted that the guy would kill this because he's bad in the night. And then the last bull was there. He realized he did not defend his friend. And then he has no argument. And there is one thing that Mark did. he democratized the torture in Guantanamo Bay and put it in a vocabulary that everybody understands. We did not know what seer means. We did not know what waterboarding is. All this vocabulary of torture that was designed in 9/11, no one knows about it. But when I read his book, okay, now I understand why they did this to me. I understand now why they did this to me, because I read his book. And this is like, so I'm just crying so much because I want American people to see this film everywhere. If there is any opportunity, like even for the law enforcement in the United States of America, to view this movie and to interview the maker, Aybüke and Chimène, I really would appreciate this.
I think that's so powerful. I agree with you. And it's, Mark, we've talked about this a lot, but history repeats itself if we don't learn from it, in so many different ways. And so that's a good perspective. And, that's the goal of the podcast and hopefully getting this film out there is just to create more awareness and this different perspective on what happened. And I don't want to keep you guys forever. So I'll just get a couple last questions specific to that really is, what's the goal and what do we hope that comes from, highlighting the relationship that you two built, highlighting the story. And again, it's not just a historical, I think the historical part is making sure we get it right. Like you all talked about, let's talk about the facts that people may have been afraid to share, but more so let's talk about the humanity of it. So, Mark, I know you've done a lot of work. You're doing a lot of, keynote speeches and testifying and writing and, but kind of specific to this film, as people get the opportunity to watch it, what's your goal? What do you hope people leave with?
Yeah, I'll give you an anecdotal story.
Yeah.
This Emily Allison at the University of Liverpool. She's heard me speak about high value target and interview investigations, and she said she's going to get me a coffee cup because she's heard me say this many times. Said terrorists are people too, right? And so we're all children of mothers or fathers, and many of us as brothers and sisters. So, people may have done some bad things, but they're people. And we have to appreciate that first and realize that sometimes even good people do bad things, but they're still human beings. You don't get to dehumanize them because of that. And particularly, in an investigator's job, as you know, when I retired after 31 years in the government, I looked back at really what my job was, and I determined it was knowledge development. Right, my job was to just develop knowledge so someone else can make a decision. And so that I hope people kind of understand. Really, that we label people. There's cognitive bias. I mean, the people who did that to Mohamedou, some of them to this day still think that he was some mastermind behind things. And we believe me, I investigated. If he was there, we went to Canada and said, "You have evidence, you give it to us, because I'll make sure this guy locked up in jail forever." When anyone said they had it, I would go. I mean, some of them, Mozambique, flew over to England and said, "Okay, you say he's a bad guy. You tell me how he's a bad guy. Give me evidence that I can present in court to do it." And so I hope people see the love that we have for each other, and just the humanity that is, I think, evident in the film that these guys really, really captured.
I think that's well said. And one last question, a kind of quick one for you, Mark, because I know we talked about this, and I know Mohamedou, we talked about whether it works versus whether it is morality or not, right? But I do have the first part of that question, Mark. Has there been any successful prosecutions or anything that came out of Guantanamo anyway?
Yeah, there are two individuals at Guantanamo now that were tried under, they were CITF investigations. They were the investigations of my task force. The others, I mean, the 9/11 suspects and the USS Cole suspects who've been accused are still in pre-trial motion hearing, right? And so I was just notified last week that I'm going to be called as a fact witness in the USS Cole case. I ran the USS Cole task force, as you know, for NCIS, and I'm actually an expert for a guy named Benetosh, who I investigated as part of the Cole attack, and so. But those people from 9/11 to Cole, coming up on 25 years, are still innocent until proven guilty under the rule of law. So we talk about never forget 9/11. We'll never forget we have people down at Guantanamo. In addition to those days, there were other people at Guantanamo who were there in indefinite detention without trial. I mean, Abu Zubaydah, who was the first, human subject testing for the CIA, the torture program, remains at Guantanamo, not because of anything he did to us, because of what we did to him.
Yeah.
Because we still don't want the world to know the depths of depravity of the decisions we made and our own inhumanity, because it's embarrassing. But I think we have to, as a nation, accept. One time we had slavery. We had Japanese internment. We've done things. The way to grow is, I used to do work with Human Rights First, and they always say America is strongest when our actions match our values. And so if we value the rule of law, if we're a country founded on human rights, how do we have this gulag in Guantanamo that is an affront to that rule of law that we profess, that we advocate around?
As you're talking, I see my other three guests here all nodding their head in agreement, which is great. I want to, Chimène and Aybüke, that the last kind of two questions for you. First was the same. Like, what do you really hope people leave watching this film? What do you hope that message is conveyed? And then second, and we'll tag any of these in the show notes, but how can people find more about what you're both working on?
Yeah, for me, and I think also for Aybüke, it's very important that people will learn from this. We would love to have the film in education, but also we just want people to see it, and also the young generation to watch it, to learn from it. And we think that's very important. We're young makers. We're in our early 20s. So yeah, I think for us it's the most important thing that people will not only enjoy the film, but mostly learn from it and feel for the people and see that there are people behind facts and there are people behind names, numbers, and that's very important to us. So yeah, where you can find us, we have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have a YouTube channel. We also have a GoFundMe page because it originally started from a school project, and people didn't want to finance us because we're still students. So the whole film is made in 20 weeks, but it's also made with our own money. So it costs a lot to make a film, but we thought it would be definitely worth it to make this, and the money is less important to us than telling the story that was on our number one. So yeah, but if you want to support the story, you can find our GoFundMe on the Leaving Hotel California.
Aybüke, anything else to add?
Yeah, from my perspective, the first time I met Mohamedou, I got so inspired. And the first time I met Mark, I also get so inspired. So I hope this film will inspire some young generation and some people. And that's the thing I remember.
Yeah, if I can hop on, because inspiring, I think for sure also in this whole process, every time something happens, we look to each other and we're like, okay, yeah, it sucks, but look into the perspective of everything like Mark and Mohamedou went through, especially Mohamedou. Like, I hope people can put a mirror in front of them and just look at themselves and think, oh, is it really that bad, or can I really not forgive those people? So inspire, learn, and yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And that's what, and Mohamedou, I'm going to allow you to wrap us up with a similar question of a message you want people to leave with. But I think one of the inspirational things on both sides is, from Mark's perspective, if there's a lot of people, especially listening to this podcast, that are in positions of authority, whether it's investigative or others, and you have a responsibility to stand up for what's right. Or as Mark talked about, maybe even unlawful orders or immoral. And so that can be a really difficult thing to do, especially in a space where you're going against the current. And you may not have a lot of allies in that space, but so I think that's always been inspiring. That's, I consider Mark a good friend, and a lot of that's because of his character, and you see that come through here. And Mohamedou, I mean, it just, as I watched the film and even just talking to you today, very similar. It's the same. It's the courage to talk about this, to reflect on it, and to be such a positive person at this point that the impact is immeasurable, I feel like. So I appreciate both of you guys, and then the two of you for putting this together in a film to make it digestible for people. But Mohamedou, I think I want to leave it with your voice. And if there's any kind of lasting message that you want people who listen to the podcast and then hopefully watch the film, what's your goal? What's your hope that people leave with?
So, just like the French philosopher Montaigne, je n'enseigne pas, je raconte. I don't preach, I tell stories. And I think the film of Aybüke and Chimène speaks for itself. Just please watch it, and you are the judge. And the second point I want to make, this is to Dave and Mark. So you guys really have very bad names as American in my region. That is North Africa and the Middle East. And I found myself in this unique, awkward position that most of the time I defend American. And I always say, Americans are not bad people. Americans are not bad people. And this is actually, people like see me as a traitor. I say, but I cannot lie because that would be bad to lie. And I remember one of the guards, his name is Edmund. I saw his name, and they had no names because they would take them. But one time they would ask me to clean their shack. And then I go clean the shack, and then I spy on everything they have. I see their name tag, and I see the books. Sometimes I steal the books. And so he used to bring me blueberry muffin. The first time ever I tasted blueberry muffin was in prison, when he used to come and just throw it in my cell and go away. And just like Mark said, we don't trust the government anymore to bring peace. We have to do it ourselves. People like Mark, who spoke when no one dared to speak, and people like Aybüke and Chimène, who are doing this work that no one really wants to deal with, because it's awkward. It's not good. And I just want to thank you, Dave, and I hope one day to see you here in the Netherlands, and to see you guys, viewing the movie and also teaching the people here, also our law enforcement, how to deal with stuff. Because we have people in our country now who want to declare certain group as terrorist group. Certain group in the left, they discuss, declaring them as, just because they want to follow the lead of the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that's great. I would love the opportunity. I didn't realize I was in Amsterdam around the same time you were premiering this movie. I was working with a colleague of mine on another film called 16 Years, about a wrongful conviction in the United States. But same concept about this kind of criminal justice reform and what are these conversations look like, but the human side of it. And so the other thing I got out of you is like, Mark, it sounds like you and I need to change our names, apparently. But I guess, we laugh about it, but it's interesting because, not to rehash what we already talked about, but at the time, post 9/11, and even in today's world, certain names are going to trigger racial profiling and injustice and these biases. And it could be something as simple as a name, or what kind of watch they're wearing, as Mark and I talked about in the last episode. So that's a great message from you, Mohamedou. I could talk to you guys all day, but for the sake of your time, I know you're all in different parts of the world right now. So I appreciate you making time for me. I encourage people to check out the show notes. We'll link all the socials that you guys mentioned for the film. We'll link the GoFundMe and the trailer so people can see what this is about. And I encourage people to learn more. Mohamedou's has a book out. Mark's got books out. But there's a lot of resources out there to learn more about the facts of what actually happened. So I appreciate you guys and the humanity of all of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, this is
Love
great.
you, bro.
Thank you guys for the time, and thank you all for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told.
To help more listeners find our show, please provide us a rating, give us a follow, and share this episode with your colleagues. For the latest news and to engage with our guests, follow Truth Be Told on your favorite social media apps, and don't forget, we are available on all major platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and watch a video of this episode on YouTube. On behalf of our guests and valued sponsors, thanks again for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told.